Sarah, welcome back again for the second time to the Built Different podcast. This is the second time I've tried to record this, so hopefully this time my computer doesn't take a flaky and comes through okay. How are you today?
Yes, I'm very well, thank you. Yeah, I was going to say that I was busy, but I hate it when people talk about how busy they are all the time. And I could definitely be busier. So, yeah,
There's a
good.
difference between busy and productivity, isn't there? Being
Yes,
productive, big time.
yes, yes. I think I could write a book on that.
So, Sarah, many reasons I wanted you on today. You are one of your titles is a fractional COO, and I think it's quite interesting in this day and age. And the reason I say that is I speak to a lot of business owners who are wearing multiple hats at all times, and COO is actually one of them. Maybe they should take the hat off sometimes. But you've also got a number of other different perspectives that I think the audience will really benefit from. So before I go down a rabbit hole, if you could tell me a little bit about yourself so the audience understands a bit more about you and we'll get stuck in.
Of course, thank you. And so as you said, I'm a fractional COO. So anyone that doesn't know what that means, it means that I COO for multiple different companies at any given time for a fraction of the time. And we can come back to that and what that means and why a company would want a fractional COO. I specialize with founder-led businesses that are growing quickly and that maybe need more structure to scale in a sustainable way. Most of my work is in digital and creative sectors, and typically I'm brought in to help teams build systems and process and boost that leadership capability. And actually lately that's included some really interesting AI projects like automating insights and improving workflows, but always with that focus on keeping sort of human judgment and creativity at the center. And yeah, my background's a bit of a mix. I'm also a qualified coach and therapist. So I look at how people lead just as much as how the business runs.
That's interesting, right? Because you're uniquely qualified to speak to founders because I know from experience, one morning you can be elated, in the afternoon you can be on the floor devastated. So having a leader and a therapist and a coach and a fractional COO in your corner could be quite helpful at times.
I like to think so, yes.
So, and the thing is with, becoming a founder, and maybe this is the first question I would like to ask you is, anyone can become a founder. Anyone can go and start a business. It's relatively cheap to go and start a business, but founders tend to start a business not with the skills necessarily that they need. And it's very much you have to learn on the job. Is that something that you see with clients that you tend to work with, that they are maybe fantastic at the project they do, they're fantastic at the thing they do, but when it comes to all the other stuff around that, managing a team, managing systems, managing different types of personalities, that they struggle? Is that a common thing?
Oh, I see it all the time. I mean, I think that it would be rarer not to see it. And I say this, but being a founder doesn't necessarily make you a leader. Being able to come up with a brilliant idea and execute on it and get people bought into it, that's a skill.
Yeah.
Leadership's a different skill. They're not necessarily connected. And so in a lot of founder-led businesses, you have your founder really killing it in sales, brilliant CEOs, brilliant CROs sometimes. But I very rarely come across founders that are also good at the integrator part, which is that COO piece. And it's not why they started their business. They don't want to be in the weeds with process and systems and people problems. And they want to be out talking about what they're doing, maybe doing podcasts, maybe meeting people, selling, and building traction for their idea. And so I think you'll often get, particularly when businesses get to a certain level of maturity, that founder who started the business is now suddenly in a horrendous firefighting mode. They're in parts of the business they don't want to be in. They're waking up in the middle of the night wondering what on earth has happened. And for many of them, they're keeping it going, but they're burning out.
Yeah, I can resonate a lot with that from a personal side and also from the amount of businesses that I speak to. So I tend to speak to business owners all the time, either to become mentees or partners. Sometimes I buy businesses. So I speak to a lot of founders. I've probably spoke to thousands of them over the last few years, and they all have kind of similar problems, which I think is quite liberating to know, because you think sometimes as the owner, as the founder of your own business, that you are alone. It's lonely and no one else is feeling the way you're feeling, but it's actually not the case.
Yeah. And, you know, I would say for any founder, really, you know, your business needs perhaps a COO when the way it's always worked has stopped working. Because, you
Yeah.
know, in the early stages, you have that wonderful founder-led energy, that instinct to drive everything, and all the decisions are quick and the communication's informal, and you've got that lovely, scrappy startup pace, which works beautifully. I guess until it doesn't, because as the business grows, then that informality starts to become a strain. Decisions take longer. Everyone's really busy, but they're all misaligned. And then you end up with that founder in firefighting mode.
Mhm.
And so what you're looking for at that point, when it's starting to feel like that, is you want someone, perhaps a COO, to come in and build that structure, to think about the rhythm of the business, to think about the systems. And I always say to founders, you know, as a COO, my role is to turn founder vision into something that's scalable, something that's repeatable. So it's about adding a capability, not replacing your founder.
Mhm. So there might be some people listening to this that don't quite understand what a COO is. It's certainly a fractional one at that. So could you give me a little bit of an insight into exactly what you do, who you help? You've mentioned a few things already: systems, processes, team. But for someone that doesn't understand that language, what is it that you do for business owners, for businesses?
Mm. You know, it's a big question because not every COO is different. And I think I'm quite a different type of COO. You get a lot of COOs who are sort of straddling that COO, CFO space, where they're looking at really deep in the numbers, like strategically in the numbers, and thinking about growth from that perspective. And yeah, you know, systems and process, integrating parts of the business. I think integrator is probably a more broad term than COO. I think COO can mean different things. Um, for me, it's about creating clarity within a
Mhm.
business. That might be the people, that might be the processes, that might be the tools and the systems. But it's about creating clarity and creating the conditions for a business to thrive and grow. A lot of what I do is focused around building a leadership team. And by a leadership team, I don't mean the founder or the CEO. What's that succession plan? Who can be in the business running it here so that the CEO or the founders can be on the business? So it's really about understanding the infrastructure, your entire operating model. So what's the rhythm and the pace and the beat of the business that you're working
Mhm.
in? Where are there bottlenecks? Where are things not coming together? Where is communication getting stifled? So you're
Yeah.
looking at the whole organism, and making sure that the pieces are all running. So I guess a little bit like the human body, making sure that blood is constantly pumping through and coming through the heart. So I think really broadly, that's what I would call a COO. Somebody there that is looking at all the different aspects of the business and making sure that they operate in a way that is efficient, that is effective, that is profitable. Yeah, I think that's what I'd say.
So you mentioned clarity, and I suppose the opposite of clarity in some respects is chaos. And so many businesses are running in a chaotic environment because everything's coming from the founder. There's nothing written down. If that founder or the leader in the group, or whatever you want to call it, takes time off, is off sick, the whole thing is falling apart. It also doesn't translate to maximizing the value of the business. So in my world, I'm trying to always improve the value of businesses. And if the owner is so integral that you can't take them out, then that business isn't actually worth a hell of a lot of money.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of stuff going on there. So effectively, what you do is you're bringing clarity, but you're probably organising the chaos in a much more streamlined fashion. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, definitely. I'd call it the messy middle of scaling. So
Mm,
that's basically when businesses are growing faster than the structure that supports them. As I said, there's always a point in a scaling business where the way it's always worked stops working. Um, and so then that's what I would call that messy middle. It's not a crisis, but it's just a sign that the business has outgrown its operating system. And so what I will do is I will come in, I will observe, I will troubleshoot, I will see where that chaos or that messy middle is sitting, and I
mm,
will help build structure and a leadership rhythm so that the business can scale without losing the energy that made it successful in the first place.
mm,
I think chaos quite often does come when people aren't clear on who's making decisions, clear on who's charged, clear on what role they have to play. Um, and I guess the other key thing probably is, as the type of COO I am, is I like to build in boundaries and a level of rigor, because I
mhm.
actually think rigor creates flexibility. And I think a lot of founders particularly are worried that rigor or boundaries create a rigidity to the business, but I actually believe it creates space for freedom and autonomy.
Yeah, because it gives them clearly defined roles, and this is my lane. Don't come in my lane unless you really need to. Yeah, I get all that. I'm curious because you've mentioned a couple of words that's triggering a book in my head, and I don't know if you've read it before, but traction. Do you know what coming? No,
No, I don't know it, but I will
it's
look it
just
up.
there's a lot of similarities with like some of the language you're using, which was triggering me, like the rhythm and chaos, clarity. He's got a system called the EOS system, um,
Well,
and
yes,
I
I know
forget what that
EOS.
stands for. Something operating system.
Entrepreneurial operating system.
That's
Yeah,
it.
I'm
Yeah,
very familiar with EOS. Yeah.
yeah. So okay, again, some of the reasons I ask these questions, right, is um, I'm going through a bit of a growth period myself in one of the new businesses I've started, and I can almost be a case study for you here. I'm a test case, right? Because it's an AI agency. It's a new business. Um, it kind of aligns quite well with all the other businesses that I have, um, because it's an extension of what I was doing before, and we're growing really quickly. We're implementing a lot of AI solutions into businesses, different AI agents. I've hired a couple of new people very recently, and I feel a little bit sometimes like I'm in the chaos, and I haven't actually started the business from scratch for about 4 years. I've just
Mm.
invested into other businesses. So it's I'm trying to retrain my brain how to actually go through all this again. So yeah, that, from a fractional perspective, and I suppose that's the key word. You come into the business from the outside,
Mm.
and what's the benefits of doing it on a fractional basis, both from your perspective and
Mm.
from the founder's perspective?
From a founder's perspective, and as I said at the top, I personally typically work with founder-led businesses, SMEs, agencies in the digital or creative space. Um, they might not need a full-time COO. There's a very good chance they can't afford a full-time COO.
Yeah.
Um, and I guess what I offer as a fractional COO is some of the discipline and skill set and expertise that they need from a COO, but perhaps don't need on a full-time basis. Now, that isn't to say that there are businesses out there that don't need full-time COOs, and I know many full-time COOs who are doing a brilliant job. So it's really about the type of organization you're working with. And I mean, from a personal perspective, I love working across multiple businesses. It might not be my forever thing, but I really enjoy it. I really enjoy getting into different environments, meeting different people. It really aligns with my personality. I'm also a really fast worker. I'm really good at getting stuff done,
Mhm.
and I feel like I can get a lot done in less time. I don't need 5 days a week, and I guess I would also argue that as a COO, it is. and particularly as a fractional COO, I need to ensure that I don't become the same bottleneck that the founder or the CEO has become. So I can't be owning everything. What my role is to make sure that the infrastructure is in place and that there is a team of very capable people within the business who can own those things. And so if I'm doing my job well as a fractional COO, I'm getting that environment set up that the team themselves can own. Which is great for them because they learn new skills, they professionally develop, perhaps they promote, they progress within the organization, they earn their leadership stripes. And so, sorry, my dog distracted me because he's trying to get into the room, but he'll
Okay.
be
My
whinging.
dog's scratching the door to get in. So yeah.
I made me lose the trail of my thought there. But yeah, I think being able to, as a fractional, I will really focus on making sure that I can step away from that business. They're not dependent on me and they can operate. So I come in, I solve a problem or series of problems and I leave. And I think for a lot of founders, that's really attractive. They don't necessarily want this never ending, very expensive, straight off the bottom line role
Yeah.
on their P&L. But if they can take some of that expertise and problem solve. And, for me, there's usually typical points in a business life cycle where they might need a fractional COO, that scaling part, that going on a growth scale. Perhaps the founder wanting an exit, a future M&A, as you said earlier. People don't want to buy a business where the founder is doing everything because that business has no value beyond the founder. And so there are certain places that I will enter the business sphere, get it set up for whatever that objective is, and be able to step back knowing that I'm not holding all the keys to success there.
Is there a typical size of company that is a minimum? There's the dog barking.
It's barking at a
It's,
pigeon.
it's usually my dog barking on these videos, so don't worry about it. It's good for the audience to hear a different dog this time.
Yeah.
Is there a typical size of company that you would your services would require? I mean, in my head, I suppose if I'm answering that question myself, it's not necessarily the size, it's the growth of the company, how quickly it's growing. Is that the right answer?
Yeah, I think it really depends on the client, on the business journey. I'm just trying to think about some of my last clients. There's that growing pain, whatever that would be, whether it's revenue or headcount, because it's not always the same, depending on the type of business. If you're, if you're like a SaaS business versus an agency, that might look different. But the growing pains of coming out of startup, getting into that space of scaling up where things need to formalize a bit. You've got lots coming in, you've got heads, you need to keep hiring to keep up with the pace. That's a really good point to bring in a COO. But also further down the line when it's much more established, but then quite often headcount is a key thing. It goes from 25 people to 50 people. You need a lot more layers in there. That flat hierarchy with everything going up to the CEO/founder, that no longer works for 50 people. You need to embed levels and teams and managers to keep the business working. So it really depends on your sort of like growth spurts as a business. And then of course that final one, thinking about exiting.
Okay. And one of the key things I like to ask on these podcasts nowadays, having started an AI agency in a business, is, and again, you're perfectly positioned, I think, to answer this, especially because you've got AI agents that you're already working with and deploying, as you mentioned at the start of the show. What is AI doing to your industry? I'm guessing it's disrupting, but is it disrupting in a good way? And I suppose what's your insights into how AI is helping you or hindering you and the businesses you work with?
It's a really good question. I would say that technology widely has changed how businesses and leadership need to operate. Everything's faster, everything's more visible, everything's data driven. And because of that, I guess it raises expectations. This sort of need for speed, the constant access to data, and it's raising expectations of clients, team members, and also leaders. And like AI is just another form of that technology, evolution. from an operational perspective, it's wonderful. It frees up time. And time is everything in professional services. Time is money, quite literally, in professional services, right? And so you're getting, your AI is summarizing things. It's summarizing notes. It's surfacing patterns, perhaps, or it's helping clients, track how their performance is going. It's automating admin, it's connecting your systems, it's surfacing insights much faster. And so it's creating a lot more space for teams and leaders to be more strategic, to use their data to focus on other things. But what I would say in my experience is that a lot of the type of businesses that I work with are not yet at the data maturity they need to be in order to effectively have AI take over sort of 60% of this type of stuff I'm talking about. Your AI is only as good as your data. And let me tell you, most agencies that come from startup to scale up and grow have very messy data. Hopefully, increasingly now people are much more aware of AI. Hopefully, they're embedding good data practices in from conception of their business. But for legacy agencies that existed before AI, this is a nightmare, because what they really want to do is build this really cool AI agent that does all these really cool things that everyone slaps on banners everywhere. But they can't do that because their data's a mess. It doesn't all live in one place. There's no single source of truth. And then if you look beyond the data, you've then got really messy workflows. Nobody's documented how a process works. Well, if you haven't got a documented workflow or documented process, the AI can't do anything. And so it's kind of the unsexy side of AI, as I call it. And I do deal with a lot of that with businesses. This is their 10. They want to get to AI. They want to achieve all those pieces. But there's quite a lot of hygiene and housekeeping first, which for a lot of people is slow and laborious.
So something you mentioned there about from putting the AI from conception. I was listening to a guy called Piers Linney. If you don't know him, he's an ex-Dragon from Dragon's Den, and he's got his own AI business, and he's got a podcast as well, which people should go and check out. It's pretty good. But he basically says that the businesses that are at risk, they're not necessarily at risk from their competitor down the street or in the next town. They're actually at risk from businesses that start with AI as the foundation. So new businesses that literally have, as you said, no crap data, no nonsense that they're trying to build on top of. It's from the beginning, it's all built properly. And that was quite interesting to hear, because people aren't thinking that way. People see their competition as the business down the street or whatever, but it's not. And I mean, young kids. I'm 33, right? But there's kids at 18, 19 building AI businesses from the ground up, and they're killing it. And that can be deployed across quite a lot of industries, especially service-based industries. So yeah, I think a lot of what you said there makes a lot of sense. So AI is good, but as you said, it's only as good as the inputs in the first place.
Yeah.
From your perspective, I've got an insight on this, which you may or may not agree with, but I think as a fractional person like yourself, I think you're really well positioned, because I think we're all aware that, or most people are aware that having one job and being stuck to one job or one company is actually pretty risky nowadays. Very risky. So I think from your perspective, when you enjoy what you do, but you've de-risked a lot of stuff for you personally as well. You're working on multiple projects at any one time. You're not tied to an industry. You're not tied to one company. So I think that's smart. I don't know if it's by design, but it's smart.
Well, it's interesting hearing you describe it in those terms, because what was making me think was a lot of my background and my experiences in agency life. And I guess in a way, as a fractional, I'm operating as a single person agency, right? I'm working with multiple clients. I'm, thinking in terms of projects and partnerships and in that way. it's great. You get exposure to loads of different challenges, but also loads of different tools. Every time I join another business, they might be using something else, and I'm having to very, very quickly onboard myself and upskill and learn about this new project management tool or this new integration or what's happening here. And that's meant that the breadth of my experience and the depth of my experience has become stronger, which makes me more valuable. And a lot of the things that I start implementing become repeatable as well, because to your point, I think you said right at the top, most founder-led problems are the same. I could get, regardless of industry, we could put 7 founders in front of us and ask them what their problems are, and I would imagine there's a few threads that go all the way through. I mean, culture is a huge one that I deal with a lot.
Yeah, bad culture, I'm guessing, just not healthy.
Just sometimes, but sometimes just a complete. I think the word culture is often used to describe a feeling. And you can see that when founders write their values, right? We're passionate, we're supportive, we're innovative. But as a COO, I would say that culture isn't a vibe. It's a system. It's how decisions get made. It's how feedback is given or how conflict is handled. And so I like to talk in terms of behaviors rather than values, because it's those behaviors that really determine how the business operates. And if you don't intentionally design that system, then you end up with this default culture without these sort of boundaries. And so you want to be thinking in terms of non-negotiable behaviors, not fluffy words. But I work with a lot of businesses that think culture is how people are feeling. And don't get me wrong, how your staff are feeling is important. But I would argue that isn't necessarily culture. To me, culture is an operating system. And if you engineer it deliberately, then everything can become clearer, faster, easier to scale. And you're also more likely to have healthy, happy, high-performing teams.
Totally agree with that. Absolutely. No, that's very well put. So the types of clients, as we begin to kind of wrap up, Sarah, what type of clients would you be looking for? So I know you've mentioned a few things already, but is there a particular type of person you like to work with or business you like to work with?
Look, it's always easier to work with founders that have a level of self-awareness.
That's tricky.
And I think certainly it's increasingly becoming more popular for founders to have this growing sense of awareness, to take on some executive coaching for themselves. Obviously, I said at the top, I work as a coach, so I quite often work with founders. And to your point about the generational piece, where you have much younger founders emerging, and in this day and age, I think coaching and mental health and self-awareness are far more on vogue. So I do really enjoy working with founders that are self-awareness, because it makes it easier to give them critical feedback and to invite them to have a growth mindset, to look at a different way to work. Working with founders that are very rigid, that don't see or can't see what perhaps they're bringing into the business. And a lot of founders bring toxicity into the business without being toxic people. They just don't know how to give feedback. Maybe they avoid confrontation. Maybe they love confrontation and go very heavy into it. And the really fascinating part is most founders are bringing in all their childhood drivers, objectives, experiences, relational experiences, insecurities. They've created a baby that is a mirror of them, the good sides, the shadow sides. And I think it's important for founders to recognize that, because it has a real impact on the business. So very long-winded way of saying I like working with self-aware leaders. But I also really like to work, I guess my ideal clients, I would say most businesses that are already successful or have been successful. But to my point earlier, that they've just outgrown their current way of working. And I think they're the ones that benefit the most. They're open to having their misalignment exposed. And I can coach as well as lead, because as a fractional COO, you're hands-on leading. But it's, to my point earlier, it's important that you're coaching people so that when you step away, those things are embedded into the business. So yeah, I think self-aware businesses that have real potential, have a really good team. Those are the best to work with. And some of the more challenging ones can be, it's a great team, but I can see 100 problems that are coming from the top. I feel like I want to make a change and make the working life better for the teams. Because I
Get rid
remember,
of the founder.
yeah, exactly, yeah.
Yeah,
So no,
sometimes that's the,
I'm really open to working with any kind of business, but they need to they need to be able to trust and relinquish a level of control. And if they can't, they're going to waste their money on me, because there's no point bringing in an expert if you're going to keep making all the decisions and not wanting to work in a different way. So, but I would usually figure that out quite early on in my sort of early discovery conversations with them and qualify them
yeah.
out. Yeah.
Yeah, same as you. So I think nowadays it's a gut feeling almost, because your gut's like honed over time, isn't it? It's honed from experience and good and bad. So now when I jump on a call with someone, I can quite quickly understand what box I'm putting them in,
Yeah.
rightly or wrongly. But I've made a lot of deals in the past, and some have worked out great, and some haven't. And you need to listen to that gut feeling sometimes.
Mm.
Um, Sarah, it's been a pleasure having you on the podcast. Um, Before I let you go,
Mm.
if anyone wants to reach out to you
Yeah.
and they want to work with you, they want to understand a bit more about what you do and how you can help them, what's the best way for someone to reach out to you?
Well, come and find me on LinkedIn. Hopefully, you can share my profile. So come find me, Sarah Harris, on LinkedIn, or email me. Um, I don't want to do too much of an email plug on this. I don't know what people usually say, but if you can help share sort of my contact details, I'm always open to hearing from people. Either you're looking for a COO, or even if you just want a bit of a chat. I love building my network. It's nice to speak to other leaders, and it's always a useful conversation. So yeah, be in touch. Come and say hi.
Yeah, I think a lot of people get value from this because, that a lot of people don't realize that options like this are there, like yourself. Like
Mhm.
people think I need to double my profits before I can go and hire. I need to treble my revenues before I can go and hire a COO. But there is options,
Yeah.
like speaking to yourself, where it's a bit more cost effective, but you still get the benefits and you still get all the
Mm.
value, which is what you're looking for.
And
So
it's worth seeing as an investment rather than a cost.
yes,
It will always feel it's not a billable role. It doesn't immediately bring in revenue, but the right COO will help you save time and money. It will make your business more robust, more scalable. I've been doing a huge piece of work at the moment with one of my clients, all focused on their delivery model versus their revenue model. Why are
mm,
projects not as profitable as they can be? And I've done a huge piece around that, to improve the profitability on every single project. So it's definitely an investment. So I would urge founders who are listening to this, who think, "Oh, that sounds great, but it's a luxury." I would say, no, it's a worthy investment for sure.
totally agree with you. Totally agree, Sarah. It's been a pleasure having you on.
Otherwise,
I think the audience will have they'll get a lot of insights from that. And if anyone wants to reach out, we'll put all your details in the show notes.
thank you so much, Stephen. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thanks.